We got the main 21. Brief history of Chicago's black gangs. Southside. Melvin Bailey, William Troop, Fletcher Pugh, Mickey Cogwell, Theodis Clark, Henry Cogwell, Lawrence White, Adam Bestick, Leroy Harrison, Jeff Ford, Eugene Harrison, Charles Edward Bay, Herbert Stevens, George Martin, Sylvester Hutchins, Lee Jackson, Paul Martin, Edwin Codell, George Rose, Andrew McChristian, Herman Holmes, David Barksdale, Jerome Freeman, and Larry Hoover. Main 21. Okay, 1966 people. We got Devil Disciples, led by David Barksdale. Black King Cobras, led by Jerome Freeman. And by 1969, Supreme Gangsters, led by Larry Hoover. Now, between 84 and 90 on out, we got the New Breeds. Black Gangsters renamed to New Breeds in 1991. And then, of course, the GDs and BDs. The Gangster Disciples was led by Larry Hoover, and the Black Disciples was led by David Barksdale. All this began in 1966. Probably can go back further than that. When, each of these guys, started moving in certain locations and neighborhoods in like 57 and 58. Stuff started getting real, in the late 60s, mid and late 60s, basically. Black P. Stones. We got Eugene Harrison, who lived at 1404 East Marquette, and it was January 1968. Jeff Ford, who lived at 6536 South Blackstone, moved there in 1955. Let's move on over to the BDs and the GDs. We got Larry Hoover, who lived at 6853 South Green, September 1968. And then David Barksdale lived at 6424 South Ashland, May 1968. You got to keep in mind these brothers was teenagers as well. They were teenagers as well. Okay. Gang structure as of 1968. Gang structure as of 1968. Black P. Stone, Jeff Ford, and then we got acting president Charles Bay, vice president Johnny Fort, nation enforcer was Melvin Burley. The Devil Disciples was David Barksdale, Nick Dorenzo. The West Side Disciples president was Ortiz Commander, they called him OJ, and the vice president was Mitchell Newton, they called Bull. East Side Disciples was Mango Strad, Roy Dawson, what they called Kilroy, and with the Black King Cobras was Jerome Freeman. And I guess it's a KT for the vice president. Now, I want to, briefly discuss about some of the things that they, carried on back then, but I would probably be forever explaining it. But something that came across when I was like, reading through these papers and getting the story about some of these cats that was, doing what they was doing for certain leaders. You got one, his name was Cornell Steele. His name was Cornell Steele. One of the earliest homicides, Cornell Steele, 22, a enforcer for the BPSN, had killed a guy named Watusi. His name was Watusi. I don't know how to spell it though. He killed someone first named Thomas Hood, 40 years of age, on February 18, 1968. He was charged for it in March 30th. A jury acquitted Cornell on December 9th. And then he killed someone else. He killed someone else on December 25th. Which is another gang member by the name of James McCain, who they call Watusi. And he was a BPSN. Both of them was BPSN. But the reason why he killed them is because he's supposed to be changing his allegiance to another rival gang. So yeah, it's getting down here like first BPSN killing. Cornell Steele killed another gang member, James McCain, also known as Watusi, on December 25th at 4160 South Drexel, apartment 307. McCain, known as Watusi, had been shot 5 times with 2 bullets to the brain. McCain had talked about changing his allegiance to a rival gang. The story behind how that had went down was that some I guess still peoples heard him talking about it to his moms about what he was gonna do to Watusi, and I guess she snitched or whatever. That's how he ended up getting caught. But anyway, the way it supposed to have went down was that they had got up with McCain and had him on the wall. They had him on the wall or something like that and told him to bend down on his knees. And they was all around him. I guess somebody was saying the 10 Commandments. And then Cornell Steele was the last person. But as they was walking around McCain, they was kissed him on the forehead. And Cornell was the last one, I guess, to kiss him on the forehead, then shot him. Bow, 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 bow. But only killed him. And now this was supposed to have been led by Jeff Ford. He gave him the spill to do it. So yeah, that's how that went down. It was rumored that McCain was supposed to be trying to go somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? And in the middle, before he had got popped off, he's begging one of them to not, kill him. He was begging one of the guys, not to go and knock him out. But hey, they was ruthless too back then. And he got the hit to do it. So Cornell Steele killed McCain, who they call Watusi. We had another incident, another thing that went down, I guess with by the name of James Highsmith. I looked him up. He's still living. He out. He supposed to be running some type of organization called Hood or something, like for gang violence or domestic violence or something like that. So he's still living, James Highsmith. But in September 1968, Larry Hoover, 18 at the time, and 2 others were shot in the leg at Parker High School. Was Mildred Silvers, 15, and Louise Jackson, 15. James Highsmith and Leonard Longsmith, both 18, and both of Eastside Devil Disciples, were arrested for it. Highsmith is a future number 3 leader, nation enforcer for the BDs, and at that time lived at 65th and Emerald, 6534 South Emerald, All 3 high school students were rushed to St. Bernard's Hospital for treatment. And yeah, Larry Hoover was one of them. 18. These dudes back then was hitting hard. They was 18, 16, 17, 15, 14 years old. Shooting and killing each other. Like I said, James Highsmith, he's still living. Surprisingly, with all the things he was doing, you know what I'm saying? He's still living. Sure lives. I seen a video with him. You know what I'm saying? So, hey, it is what it is. So, I want to come across certain, stories about how these cats was doing their thing too. And how they was, living that life, gang banging and shooting and killing. It's the same thing what these cats is doing today. Unfortunately, these cats is they dying for some reason. They dying more and quicker than back then. And these was 1968 rival gangs. 60s? These cats was in the 60s killing each other. So, moving on about the gang structure. Vice President, we got the Black P. Stone, Jeff Ford, and the acting president Charles Bay, Vice President Johnny Ford, Nation Enforcer Melvin Burley, Devil Disciples David Barksdale, Nick Dorenzo, West Side Disciples President Ortiz Commando OJ, Vice President Mitchell Newton as Bull, East Side Disciples Mingo Strad or Streed, and then Roy Dawson Kilroy. His nickname I guess Kilroy. And then Black King Cobras was Jerome Freeman, and Vice President was KT. It was another one I wanted to discuss about Jeff Ford having his son jump for also trying to go to another gang or whatever, I don't know what was the deal between him and his son, but it was another incident about that too. I think that was in 1986. I think in 1986. Last story for Jeff Ford ruling the streets. Jeff Ford was taken by feds in summer 1986. And in 1991, a snitch testified this story about Ford, that he ordered a violation to his son, Antonio Fort, in 1986 at the Fort Temple, which was demolished in June of 1990. His son had tried to start his own gang. That's what it was. He was trying to start his own gang. Antonio Fort. And Fort didn't allow it. Pops, he ain't allowed it. So while on the phone from prison to the Fort Temple, Fort said, "Son, I told you, I keep my promises." According to the snitch Henry Harris, 6 of the 14 ambassadors formed a circle around Antonio. Fort then said, "Ambassadors, I want you to drum him until I tell you to stop." When the men hesitated, Fort said, "I can't hear nothing." The ambassadors then attacked Antonio for about a minute. His arms were handcuffed behind his back the whole time. Then Jeff spoke to his son alone. Then he was freed. He had his own son whooped because he was trying to start his own gang. That's crazy. His pops go to jail and he out here trying to start his own gang. Fort get whooped for him. He had him over the phone saying whoop him. And they did it. Henry Harris, who is the husband of Jeff Fort's sister, told the courts he tried to get Antonio to escape the beating. When U.S. Attorney Theodore Poulos asked Harris why, Harris said he witnessed something and never said nothing about it. When Poulos asked Harris to explain that, he said, "He caught me with his mother." "Did you have an affair with Diane Ford?" And he said, "Yeah." So basically, Henry was saying that he was trying to look out for Antonio because basically Antonio looked out for Henry for catching him sleeping with his moms, and he ain't never say nothing to his dad. He married to Antonio's auntie, which is Fort's sister, but Antonio caught Henry with his mommy, just for her wife, I guess, Yeah, his wife, yeah, because she got his last name. So basically, he was trying to look out for him because he didn't say nothing, So basically, I want to throw that out there. It was like one of those little trivia, little stories that, we can just shake our heads about. We got the Gregory Shell story. Gregory Shell is Shorty G. July 19, 1974. 16-year-old Gregory Shell and 14-year-old Serene R. Traylor charged with murder of a 66-year-old woman. Really? Josephine Hay. In an armed robbery outside of St. Albans Catholic Church, 90th and Harper, 9015 South Harper. Gregory Shell is the future number 2 leader for GDs for the early 1990s. Shell back to the church. Shell lived at 8245 South Blackstone and Traylor at 7941 South Wood. Now, note that at this time, during this little incident right here in 74, they are both BPSN at this time. They are both Black P. Stone Nation at this time, 1974. Josephine was shot in the neck and ran back to the church and allegedly died in the priest's arms. So, in the 90s, Gregory, also known as Shorty G, had flipped into GD. He dropped his flag and went Gangster Disciple, and he became number 2 leader. But it was my surprise when I read this because I thought that Shorty G, if this the same Shorty G, I thought that Shorty G became the number 2 for the Black Disciples. I never known for a number 2 to have occurred under Larry Hoover. Never known that. And we talking about the 90s. I never heard of any Gangster Disciples claiming that Shorty G was the number 2 leader. Everybody was claiming Larry Hoover for a long time. Never heard of him being part of the Gangster Disciples. I always thought that he was supposed to came after David Barksdale, even though David Barksdale died I think in the 70s, something like that. But I didn't know that Gregory Shell was a number 2 leader for the Gangster Disciples in the 90s. I didn't know that. I'm still kind of needing to look for more information about that because that's news to me. Anyway, September 2nd, 1974, David Barksdale dies of kidney failure at 27. Buried in Restville Cemetery. His funeral was at Golden Gate Funeral Home, 2036 West 79th Street. Survived by his wife Yvonne, known as Cookie, son David 4, and twins Melinda and Ronald, 17 months, and 13 brothers and sisters. His wife died on June 24th, 1978. So yeah, David Barksdale died in 1974. He had got shot in the kidneys. And he survived. He survived the gunshot wound. I don't know where I had read that left off at where he had got shot at, but he did get shot. And due to kidney failure, that's when he died at 27. But after he had passed away, as years passed back, I was born in the late 70s, so I didn't get with about none of this like in the 80s and the 90s. But I was still stunned about Shorty G. I thought Shorty G, if this the same Shorty G, had became chief of the Black Disciples after the passing of David Barksdale. But hey, so yeah, that's a story about that so far. I try not to go too deep because I don't want to keep getting strikes on my videos and all this shenanigan because YouTube hate on me. I'm too deep and too spiritual at times for them, so they don't like my channels. People get a whiff of me speaking spiritual, they complain about that, so I'm not finna stop teaching the truth, but at least with this, speaking about the main 21 gangs, it ain't worth me going through all that, speaking about the gangs. So, we have interview with a GD board member. I myself personally met Gator. I met him personally twice, like 1995 when they had the Million Man March in Washington D.C. But they were Gator and the Gangster Disciples back then, like the shorties or whatnot, my age back then, like 17, 18, had them out there passing out flyers, to the guys to try to go on down there and get with for the march. But I met him then I met him again personally on the train back like it was 2012 or something like that, I want to say. Maybe 2011 or 2012. I met him on the train and we talked for a minute on the train alone. And Gator is he was one of the board members for Larry Hoover. He was one of the board members for the Gangster Disciples back in the 80s and 70s or 80s or something like that, y'all. So yeah, he's a cool cat. He was trying to run for, I forgot what political thing he was trying to run for, but he was trying to do his thing, in the 90s. Good brother though. Anyway, so interview with a GD board member. I don't know who this board member is that's speaking, but I don't know who this brother is, but we gon' go on with the story about what he was saying. So in spring 2021, this is 2021, so this is recent, I got a confirmation from a GD board member that Booker Ransom was the first GD to be killed. This was to clear confusion that all the newspapers mistakenly listed Booker Ransom as a devil disciple than Supreme Gangster. When Jeff Fort declared Stones a Muslim gang in 1976, and hundreds flipped to GDs. This is a trivia right here, y'all. When Jeff Fort declared Stones a Muslim gang in 1976, and hundreds flipped to GDs. And that's what usually happens, people. Quote, positive state. People don't want to be on that, man. They ain't trying to be Muslim. People want to eat pork, drink alcohol. They want to do their thing. You know what I'm saying? It's a video up here, with Jeff Fort. They had a little party back in the day, and I seen a couple brothers in the fort drinking beer. You know what I'm saying? They was smashing, eating chicken wings and drinking beer. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. But I don't know if that was then when they flipped. But it had to been there because they was throwing the Air Rookie party. So it had to been either, well, if it was, 1976 is when he changed it from Stones to Al Rookins in 1970. So this party that they was at, it had to been like in the late 70s or early 80s, because of the music that they was playing in the background was like late 70s, early 80ish. So yeah, they was era rookies, and like I said, I done seen a couple cats in there getting down, smashing, eating whatever they was eating. It looked like some pork to me and some beer. I seen the Miller's Light in their hand. So whatever. But to make a point about it, what I'm saying, when you try to have an organization, you try to flip it for good means or whatnot. The brothers and the sisters, they ain't trying to hear that. They don't want to be part of nothing that's, quote, positive, because it's going to make them seem like they're a punk or something. You know what I'm saying? Just like with Larry Hoover when he tried to change it to growth development instead of Gangster Disciples. A lot of people stopped. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people went from GD to BD back then. And in this case, when Ford declared Stones a Muslim gang in 76, like they said, hundreds flipped GDs. And that's... in the 80s, Gangster Disciples had the whole South Side sold up. And as I got a little older and started seeing and knowing things and getting information about it, I know for a fact the Gangster Disciples was running it on the South Side of Chicago. I seen it. And then, like, later on, when Hoover switched from Gangster Disciples to Growth Development, then you had majority of the GDs, they flipped and went BD. People ain't trying to hear that. People ain't trying to be, quote, positive, even though these gangs is not positive when they do that. It's just a storefront. That's all it is. But just the sound of it sound whack to most of these cats. So they'll flip, you know what I'm saying? Because, you got to stand by some of the rules on what the gang stand for. And some of these cats ain't trying to hear that, man. Ain't growth development. Ain't growth development money, man. That's what they thinking about. Al Rookins, man, look at I want my pork. I want my pig feet. I want my hot dogs. I'm drinking my beers, you know what I'm saying? So people ain't trying to be on that. Gregory Shell, Shorty G, was the biggest ranking GD that flipped from. The biggest ranking Stone to flip was Kabar. Very familiar name. A big Stone general from Motown to No Love City, 59th and Halsted. He flipped early 80s when he couldn't adhere to not eating pork or drinking alcohol. I just said that. The biggest ranking for both gangs was Moon from the West Side, a smaller Stone general, to GD, then became GD governor in the 80s. From Chicago, Lockwood to Kilbourne, Van Buren, this West Side right here. The biggest ranking BD that used to be a Stone from that flip was two of them. Dirty Mike, who was minister of the Henry Horner Homes in the 80s and 90s. Then after him, Trey Sean, who succeeded him in the late 90s. Both of them were originally Gangster Stones. This was before Gangster Stones split off from the Stones. Look at all that. All these new information about how these gangs was named and how they stopped and began. And see, that's the reason why I started off with the main 21. See, the main 21 was the main, all of them together. They was all in cahoots with each other back then. All of them was in cahoots with each other. The gang could have been Black Power, Disciple, Gangster, the Cobra. They could have had a big name like that, and you know what I'm saying, they could have just went on and just did right for the community. All of them could have just got together, made one big name for all of them, and ran the whole Southwest Side, whole Chicago, and probably would have been a nice, decent billionaire ran city with black people. You see how the males was running it back then, and how they treated the black people, put all them in one little area. on the south side, all these projects they built it up. Yeah, okay, well, hey, they should have did the same thing. Went on and demolished the buildings and made some big, nice homes for the blacks. Jeff Ford had millions of dollars that he done manipulated the government to give him and just misused it for his own selfish, evil intentions. But if he'd have done right with that money, he ain't no way him alone would have been successful with the communities on the south side. And they had programs, they had buildings, but they just did otherwise negative means with it. And of course, which got them locked up for the rest of their lives. Years later, Edward Moore was a BD that wanted to be a leader, so he paid Freeman to flip two BDs in prison in the 90s for a minister position. He didn't like the GDs and hated a lot of their leaders, so BDs was his choice. When he got out of prison, he wore a lot of expensive jewelry and had more bodyguards that followed him than Freeman did. So Freeman told him to cut down on both. The biggest ranking GD to flip was Valentino, a GD board member. Flipped to CVL, then killed by vice lords. April 96, because he extorted. 2 months later, a different GD that flipped to MIVL, Knowles was his name, Jimmy Lee Jackson, was killed by VL's June 96, also for extorting. The biggest ranking GD, Stones, and BDs tortured by John Burge. If y'all familiar with the Burge tortures, the guy, that white fat man who was the chief and was torturing all the gang members back then, and they had that big fat lawsuit. But there have been some governors, Madge from Inglewood, Mr. Luis, and G Sharp from West Side. For Stones, 2 Stone General was tortured by Bird before. Darrell Cannon and Pharaoh. Then the Nation Enforcer, White Cloud, and Patrol Peanut. These crazy names, man. For BDs, no board members been tortured by Burge before, but there have been some ministers. KT, the Minister of Ministers, Jackie Wilson, but took his membership away in prison, and Kenny Parker, then a co-minister, Melvin Jones. How did David Barksdale and Larry Hoover first met? They grew up together but did not attend the same high school. In 1969, when David Barksdale asked Larry Hoover for their 2 gangs to merge into a unity. Where did that conversation take place? Washington Park. Everybody know what Washington Park is. I'm from Chicago. Like I said, I'm speaking on behalf from an interview with a GD board member. That's why the questions and the answers sounding the way it sounded. It's an interview with a GD board member. I don't know what board member that is, but I can say that the board member I have met was Gator. He was very spoken. You know what I'm saying? He's very spoken, so I can't say that's him, but that's the only one that I know of that's, more speakative about Larry Hoover and, how they did their thing back then and whatnot. When the 2 gangs decided to merge, what church did that meeting take place? At Jesse Jackson's church in 50th and Drexel. See? Jesse Jackson Church. And I know where that's at. That's Rainbow Push Coalition place, 50th and Drexel. And this is back in the 60s, so y'all know the famous picture with Jesse Jackson, Jeff Ford, and Mickey Cockwell. So there you go right there. So you know he ain't lying. Table of John Burge Torches compensations. July 2012. 53.575 million. 44.9 million from the city. 8.655 million from the county. May 2013 minus 60 million. June 2018 115 million. September 2018 132 million. 83 million from the city. 2019 140 million. Expected another 14 million for 2022. Ooh-wee. For Detective Guevara, as of February 8, 2022, $73 million, $53 million to 4 people, $20 million attorney fees. Wow. We talking about millions from 2012 all the way to 2022. Man, 10 years of millions of dollars because of the John Burge tortures. So, the good news is that they get millions out of this for those that was tortured by this prick. Just a brief history on the main 21. Back then with the gangs and where they at now and what they went through themselves and in the midst of their upbringing with the gang violence. Let's put the guns down, let's pick up these Bibles, and let's stay respectful amongst each other. We'll live long when we use our wisdom, godly wisdom that is. You gotta use godly wisdom, you'll live longer. Only fools die sooner than they supposed to.